Welcome to ISES Hangouts. ISES is the International Special Events Society, the principal association representing the creative events professional globally. We facilitate these hangouts with the aim of encouraging inspirational creativity through collaboration and teamwork, with the hope of building relationships and continuing the education of the entire events community. You can find the International Special Events Society at ISES.com. If you want to join in the conversation, you can do so several ways. You can email us, hangouts@isesvancouver.com, tweet using the hashtag ISESHangouts, or comment on our YouTube channel. Post your comments, tweet, and we'll do our best to answer your questions. For now, sit back, relax, and enjoy today's ISES Hangout. Yes, that's right. Welcome to ISES Hangouts. Today we have a really exciting topic. We'll be discussing advice, tips, and tools for communicating with musicians and entertainers at your special events. As always, I have an amazing panel. I have Anthony, who's coming in all the way from Columbus, Ohio, and the ISES chapter over there. And from Vancouver, we have Bob from Airwaves Music. We may have some other people jumping in partway through the show, so we will stay tuned for those people. But to kick things off, why don't we start off with Anthony? Why don't you give me a bit of an idea of your background and your history with live events, musicians, and entertainers?
Sure. I'm a freelance lighting designer, and in the past I've worked for production companies, and we've had plenty of event planners come in and they say they want to have this band play, whether it's a local act or a headline act, and a lot of times they don't really look through those writers very well, and we have to kind of coach them through, what are the technical needs and what are those additional hidden costs that are part of hiring the entertainer.
Great. Bob, Airwaves Music, what can you tell me about your company?
Sure, absolutely. So we're currently Canada's only national DJ company. We're in 12 cities, and before that we booked not just DJs but also bands. So for 6 years of our history, we booked musicians in 4 cities throughout BC, and have definitely done a few thousand gigs with musicians by this time, so I've seen it all. And I'm a musician myself, and I play in a band right now as well. So.
Yeah, great. Have to check you out.
Yeah, you have to come to a show.
Yeah, let me know. Well, let me know, and let the rest of ISES know, because we're always keen to check out some live music.
Sure, love it.
But I heard a word that we're probably going to hear a lot in Anthony's first statement. So I'm going to jump straight into this topic. Can we explain to the viewers what an entertainment writer is? Who wants to jump in there? Either one of you.
Go for it, Bob.
So basically, it's a list of wants and needs that the musician has, both from a production point of view and from accommodation point of view, food. Just basically, I think of it as a list of musicians' demands of what they want for the night. So that, I'm sure Anthony is most familiar with the technical side. I've dealt with all forms of rider requests. And they usually get more intense the higher the budget the band.
So, Anthony, what kind of things would we see on an entertainment rider? What's the sort of standard spec? Obviously, we talk technical. What do those technical elements generally entail?
So the technical elements will depend on what the musicians are carrying with them. So they can vary from backline requirements or the musical instruments themselves, to the sound system, depending on the venue that they're at, down to the lighting that may be needed in order to produce the show that they're trying to create for your guests.
Bob, anything to add there?
I was going to say, yeah, that rider could become a huge budget item. So I guess that's what we're going to talk about a little bit today, but if you're expected to pay for the band and supply the rider, you really need to look at your costs for that first, so you don't go overboard.
So I guess it's important that you are making the decision on your entertainment very early on, and you're taking into account, as you've said, this rider and how that fits with your budget before you start signing any sort of agreement contracts with the artist. I guess this moves us into the next sort of topic of what are the most common mistakes that planners make when booking entertainment and musicians for their events.
Not looking at the technical writer.
Okay.
But I would say,
yeah.
Sorry. So I would say also the big challenge is not realizing that a lot of it is negotiable, depending on when the act, how busy the act is. They may be willing to give way to some of those needs. If it's a flyover date, a lot of the stuff I've worked with has been larger national acts where you look at the rider and it's extremely intimidating. Probably some of the stuff Bob's referring to, down to the old I don't want green M&Ms in my bowl of candy.
I'd just like to welcome Heidi, who's just joined us from Vancouver Island. Heidi, do you want to give us a bit of a background on where you sit in the events industry and how your relationship in the past has been with booking musicians and entertainers for your events?
Sure. So yeah, I'm based in Victoria, and I have a company called HBL Events. For the past 12 years, been mainly working in nonprofit, doing large-scale fundraising, and that's where I actually started working with lots of different kinds of entertainers and musicians, and it's absolutely my favorite part of my job. Yeah, so sort of a wide variety of working with a lot of local musicians, a lot of community groups, but also working with some big agencies in Canada, Feldman and Associates and the agency group out of Toronto. So a wide variety of working with agents, artists, the whole thing.
Great. So we were just talking about entertainment writers. I'm interested from a planner's perspective. How do you deal with an entertainment writer? How do you understand the more complex ones? What tools do you have for deciphering this, as Bob put it, the list of demands to book that entertainment act?
Well, yeah, I remember the first one I got, and I looked at it, and I could barely understand the language. So, I've got sort of the tech writers and the hospitality writers, two different pieces to it. So I think the way I learned was I reached out to some friends who are local musicians and sat down with them and started to learn the language. Now it is one of my favorite parts too to deal with. I love it when I get a writer and I get to see what's going to go on stage plot, and all the different needs that they have for backline and stuff. Yeah, they can be very complicated, so it is something you need to learn to decipher. I've also become very good friends with Victoria Backline here, so often when I'm negotiating with an artist, right away I'll send some of that if I don't understand all of it to them, and they'll decipher it for me, so I know what I'm getting into before I sign a contract.
Well, that's great. That's a point that I think everyone's raised so far, and I think it's also important to mention that if you can't understand it and you don't have an existing network of musicians that you know, I mean, let's face it, most of us do, but you can reach out to your local ISES chapter as well, and if you're a member of that, you instantly have a great network of industry professionals that you can utilize to translate, decipher, and decode a very technical writer. Okay, so here's a question. I'm going to play devil's advocate. What do you do if you've booked an act but you can't afford what's on the rider?
I think at that point, you're going back to the band and you're going to ask for forgiveness and see, what can they work with. Maybe they don't need quite as much, and within the hospitality rider, maybe there's equipment that can be substituted in the technical rider that'll at least get them by and still get them comfortable enough to be able to produce the show that they're used to producing.
Does anybody want to add anything to that?
I think you might be in trouble if you don't have that.
I
They might
agree
not
with
want to.
Bob.
Might not want to come back.
That it is up to you to know all that up front. If you've made that mistake, it's on you.
That's part of how you budget for the band, I'd say, and I think it really means a lot to them because for them to deliver the experience that you're hiring them for, they need, especially that equipment, right? They need that show to be what they're used to, and you don't want to surprise anybody, especially a creative like that.
Maybe that's an interesting little segue there. You mentioned people like that, a creative like that. Is it fair for us to classify musicians and entertainers as quote unquote creative types? And is there a specific psychology that needs to be applied for dealing with creative types? Sorry, they're really hard hitting this week.
well, I'll take that because I am a musician and
Yeah.
I live with a musician. My girlfriend is one. So I'm going to say yeah, absolutely. Musicians think a little bit differently, and sometimes that's a really, really good thing, and sometimes that's a really hard thing from a business point of view because they're going to have different needs and wants out of their reasons for doing what they're doing. You know, so we might be putting on an event to say, wow, look at this huge client we have. We just worked with Pepsi. And the musician might say, I don't care about Pepsi. In fact, I'm not even happy I'm performing for Pepsi. I'm glad that there's going to be 3,000 people there, and that's my motivator. And then I get to play my original stuff. And we've had a lot of artists, because we used to actually book bands from everything from weddings to small corporate events to 15,000 person party at Tough Mudder. And so when you're hiring a band for a specific purpose, it's one thing to bring the Stones in to play Rolling Stones music. It's another thing to bring in a band because they feel like at Tough Mudder it's the right vibe for their event. And they've scouted this band or asked you to scout them, and now they're showing up. I think it's really important to have a relationship in those cases with the bands that you're working with, or at least have a really good handle on their reputation, because what happens if the drummer and the singer have a fight and they decide they're not gigging anymore? And as event planners, we like to book 6 months out. Or what happens if a better gig comes up in between the time you book them and they've been booked? Well, you have a contract, but to a creative, that doesn't necessarily mean a lot because they might not have a lot to lose. And we experienced all kinds of things like this, which ended up with us putting bands on float planes at the last minute to get to the gig on time, to creating our own riders that were hospitality riders that were very enticing to encourage them to come. And I find it's the other things besides the money that really draws them in. It's not so much about pay, although that's very important. It's all the other little things that you're going to do for them. Exposure opportunities. Is it going to be on video? How many people will be told about the event? Those sorts of things.
Great. Anybody else want to add anything on that before I say my piece?
I think artists are very creative people, and I agree with Bob. I think they do. They can think very differently, and as an event producer, I think it's my responsibility to learn how best to communicate with them. So before or during the show, I've had different circumstances where it is definitely a lot easier to deal with through agents and managers. All that communication's open, and then just working with the artist that night. But those times where that artist doesn't have a manager or an agent, it's a whole different way of communicating with them. And often I find those ones are definitely the most creative and think very differently. Yeah, you've got to be prepared for it, and it takes a little bit of experience in working with them to know how it works best for you and them.
I think that's some great points. What I think it's really important for planners and event people in general to know technical as well, to remember about the artists or the musicians, is that they have invested a lot of time and a lot of energy in getting very good at what they do, or very bad in some cases, but either way, they've invested a lot of time in that, and so for you to you need to be cognizant of that, and you need to be respectful of that when you're dealing with them and when you're asking them to maybe make concessions for you and your event. because they have spent money, time, and effort in ways that you'll never see or you've never seen leading up to that point. So to ask them to do something for free for the sake of exposure, or to not eat for the night, sort of devalues the investment that they've probably put into their art from a very young age or for many, many years. Now, Heidi, you gave me another amazing segue, and I thank you for these. It really helps in getting things flowing. Can we talk about what the difference is and what the roles are of a booking agent as compared to an artist manager?
Let's see. I work with 2 big booking agencies in Canada often, and I go through the agent probably leading up to everything, so I don't even meet the manager till day of, and or the artist when I'm working with that agency. So the agent, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, anyone else, but in my experience, the agent sort of takes care of all the details leading up to the gig, and then manager takes over day before or day of. Yeah, it's been a very smooth process for me, but I'm sure you guys might have some other stuff to add to that.
That sounds right to me. Typically, you're using the booking agent to be the middleman, and then on the technical side of things, we'll even work with a tour manager separate from the artist manager, to make sure that they have everything they need technically. And the tour manager is working with the artist manager.
I think that's all correct. I also wanted to touch on the last point too. I think it's really important as event producers that, especially for famous bands is one thing, but for the smaller local bands, realizing that when it does come to compensation, maybe they're only going to do 12 gigs all year, or maybe 20 at the most. And so, for us, we're doing events all the time with big budgets. We think, oh, you guys can take a little hit on this one. It's no big deal. Whereas for them, that might be, one full month of their entire year's livelihood, and an opportunity that for them is very rare and very exciting. So I think it's important to keep that in mind when we're coming up with, compensation for especially smaller local or regional bands. And then, in my experience, the small local and regional ones don't have a manager, so that's going to be your job the day of. And then the bigger bands, the bigger the budget, probably the better the manager, and the more involved they're going to be as well. By better, I just mean more experience.
Yeah, I agree, Bob. If they don't have an agent, chances are they might not have a manager. Well, no, that's not true. I guess they'll have a manager, but when they don't have a manager, you become their manager on top of managing the event as well. So, yeah, you have to be aware of that.
Those are my favorite, because when you ask them for a stage plot, they question marks start appearing above their head.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's talk to that. It's sort of progressing naturally like an event would. We've now turned up on site at our event, and we need to. The band doesn't have a manager. What are some of the things we need to do now that we're on site? Maybe it is partway through the load-in, the technical's getting set up, you're setting up your registration table. What's the next step for you as a planner or as a manager of a band to get that band on stage in time?
Well, I definitely, if I have a lot of other things on the go that day, if it's not me, it's my assistant that's full-time with them, greeting them and walking them through everything and staying with them for every need they have. So when they're doing sound check or set up on stage, you got to be with them the whole time. Usually that's their manager, so if a manager comes on with the band, I greet them and make sure they're comfortable, everything's good, let them go through everything they need to. But if that manager is not there, someone has to be there with them.
And there's little local things to know too, for the smaller gigs, little tricks to know, like you don't want to ask a band to show up for sound check at 7 a.m. Your chances of them being there just went down by 50%.
75.
You don't want the band, there setting up the equipment, especially if it's a small gig with no sound tech there. Sometimes you'll be like, oh, just set up, and then the tech will be by later for sound check. just expect if you do that nothing will happen in between now and sound check, or that something bad will. And I just find spending time, I know event planners get busy, but just have someone there to develop that relationship with the band, because the last thing you want to do is make them feel like they're just hired guns that don't matter, because that's going to be the result you get at the show. So make them feel looked after, you know, talk to them, get to know them, spend as much time as you can. For me, it happens way before the show. I like to hang out with them at least once over coffee or beer, get to know them. But at the day of the show, too, you have to be present or have someone that is.
Yeah.
From a technical standpoint, obviously my background, what I find is, like Bob said, it's all in the pre-production. It's all in the planning before you even get to site that's going to dictate how smoothly things go on site. So if you have that technical writer, if your audiovisual audio company, lighting company has that writer, they know what to expect before the band even turns up on site. They will have a lot of things ready to go to keep things smooth and flowing, because we've all seen the sound check that's supposed to go for 45 minutes, half an hour, and all of a sudden it's drawn out into a 2-hour
Rehearsal
process. Yeah. Or just setting up microphones, because all of a sudden they realize that it is in fact a 16-piece band.
Well, there's some questions, Anthony, that I think the events community should remember to ask before the gig too. So, you know, some common things I've seen is, are all the original regular members of the band going to be the ones that are playing? Because to a musician, he might be like, oh, we're going to switch out our lead guitarist, and because we have to get the gig, we want to make the money. And to him, it's like, well, whatever. But to you, it's like that's going to be terrible. Or what are they going to wear? Is drinking allowed? You know, like little rules that you think are common sense might not be common sense, and not in a negative way to the musician, but that's just maybe at their regular gig they have a few drinks every night, and they don't realize that this corporate gig they can't. Other things like, you know, what songs are you going to play? What's your set list? Because I know musicians love to say, oh, we'll just learn a song a couple days before. That always comes up at our band practice, and it's like, no, we should probably do the songs we've practiced 100 times and not throw 4 new ones in one night before the show. So I think going over those simple things, having a little checklist that you both read over together in person and mark off with the whole band is very important.
That kind of segues us into another. I'd love to throw to the panel, if each member can please give me the top 2 mistakes that you've seen a planner make when booking their musician or their entertainer. And we can't say not reading the writer, we've already hit that one. So what are 2 other mistakes that are commonly made?
Hiring the band because of how they sound and not because of their reputation. So it's really easy to go, I'm really excited about this band, I saw them on YouTube, or I saw them at a bar locally, let's get them for this really important event. And it's like, if they don't do events like that, or they haven't before, you're really taking a risk, I think. And then the other one is just not getting to know the band beforehand and treating them like you would with a professional videographer or photographer. Hey guys, just show up and sound checks at 2. And I think that, especially a new band you haven't worked with before, you really want to get to know and explain kind of the policies and procedures and what you're going for, and all that before you even book them, to be honest, because they might not be cool with what you're trying to do.
Mm-hmm. Anthony, what about what's your top 2?
Let's see. Using live bands for a full production, basically background music for an award ceremony, and not realizing that you should probably book them for earlier in the day and at least plan on some rehearsal time so that they know what's going on and you have a way to communicate with them. Yeah, let's just say I had an experience with that once. It's not pleasant.
No need to name names, it's fine.
No. That's the big thing, and then just bands not having a technical writer when they're new at doing this or doing corporate events, and not understanding that the reason why we need it is to help them out so that we're making their life easy for them. When they get there, all they have to do is get their instruments out, get tuned up, and do a show.
Great. Now, Heidi, I know HBL would never make any mistakes on any of your events. You know, your reputation precedes you. But what are your top two that you've seen? Of course, not you. Other people make when you're dealing with them.
Other people, yeah, right. No, I'll go. What Bob talked about, knowing the band you're booking. I'll say it was me who booked a band that was quite popular, and I'm like, I like their sound, and I had a main stage going all day downtown, and I put them on, but I kept hearing from everyone that they were a very difficult group to work with, and I didn't listen to that. And that was a nightmare with this group, and people have been telling me about it. So I should, their reputation is really important to know. Talk to people. You know, you might like the sound of someone, or you might think they're the right fit. Find out a whole bunch of information about how they actually work before you book them, because it can be quite challenging. And the other example I have, I guess, I book a lot of artists for big charity events, for big fundraisers, and something we definitely have to do is educate them on what the charity is, because when they're out, there's that extra piece to it when they're performing on stage that they often have to speak to, and it's my job to make sure that they're informed and educated about who's in that audience that night. I didn't used to do that at the start, and now I really do. I have to communicate that information to them to make them feel comfortable, but also for when they're speaking to things on stage.
Good stuff. So one thing that I've seen often is the planner constantly trying to dig out the technical writer from the band and not getting anything, even from the manager, not being able to get a technical writer because, like Anthony said, it doesn't exist. And the big mistake is that they keep pushing and pushing and sending the email saying, can we get your writer? And you need to sense as a planner that I'm not getting it, maybe it doesn't exist, and they're trying to make one. What's often a lot quicker for you to do is to loop that entertainer, that band, that manager in with your tech provider. Just an email saying, hey, meet Anthony. He's going to be doing your lighting at the show. Why don't you start a discussion? So rather than trying to find something that doesn't exist, you can start a conversation via email, or at least get some information flowing rather than turning up on site with nothing. I think that's really good to know, as you mentioned, the same thing, communicating what the style of the music is and if it fits your crowd. My sister's never going to forgive me for booking Slayer for our niece's christening, and it's not going to happen again.
It's probably worth it, though.
So, where do we find artists, entertainers, and musicians for our events?
I think there's a variety of ways. I know I'm very passionate about the music scene, so I am constantly looking, listening, looking at my local scene, but also keeping an eye on Seattle and Vancouver, talking to people, going out with musicians all the time, hearing what's out there. Also, when you work with some of the agencies, they're constantly sending you who's on tour. And one of our great local resources in BC is the BC Touring Council. They actually have their, I think, Pacific Contacts this weekend, where you can go and sit through like 3 days of artists that are going to be touring in BC. So you can learn about that. So there's lots of different ways, but I think you have to keep your finger on the pulse on what's going on and being aware of who's out there.
How about the other gents? What ways do you find musicians and artists?
There's some local booking agents here in Columbus that we go through and we have connections with, and they've got ties to local artists as well as larger named artists. They've got their ways of connecting with them.
So, yeah, for me, the reason I started my company was because as a musician, I know how hard it is to find these gigs, and it's usually the last thing on your list as a musician to, oh yeah, I need to go find work. So, I'm really passionate about helping them find work that suits them, that pays them well so they can do what they love. That was like the whole mission behind why we created Airwaves. So for me, I look at it like a treasure hunt. You want to go out to pubs, you want to go out to lounges and clubs and restaurants and hotels, and for me, that's a huge part of my life anyway. I try to do that as much as I can, and the level of talent you can find by just connecting to your network and saying, hey, I'm looking for a band in this style. I always try to see them before I book them for anything, obviously, live, not in a video, because that's another common mistake is, oh, wow, this video is amazing, and then live it's a different story.
Yeah.
But one of the best bands I ever found was just at a little hole-in-the-wall bar, and we booked them tons of gigs, and they just said, you know what, we never would have known about like what an agent was or a manager, or that there was these kind of gigs that existed, but they were so tight, so talented, and the nicest guys. So, you know, I think just seeing live music a huge part of your life is really important.
I agree with Bob, and that's what I do too, and definitely not booking someone from just the video, but seeing them live. So it's constantly going to pubs and bars and live shows and seeing, and that's how I have found lots of different groups.
We got a comment from online from Corinne Castle who points out she totally agrees with Bob. Her band often gets booked for corporate gigs, which is fine. They want to do them. But the question is, does the corporate client want 2 hours of ska reggae music? And then the audience spends the entire show running up asking them to play cover tunes, which they do not do. So that's a really great point. And we've said it many times now, know the musicians, know the appropriateness for the event, and keep communication clear between everybody who's involved in the event. So, another brilliant segue. I'm getting good at this. What are the tools that exist out there in the world, online, maybe traditional medias, to communicate with artists, entertainers, and musicians?
Well, Anthony, I used to have a website that we put about a year's coding into called rocketgig.com, and it would allow you to upload all the bands and musicians you work with, rate them, have them put videos and photos, previous prices paid, secret notes that only event planners could see. You could share them, so you could actually go through my database and see all my musicians, what I've used them for in the past, and you could create your own as well, but nobody really used it, so we took it offline. So if anybody wants that,
that'd be good, Bob.
three clicks of a button, and I'm happy to bring it back to life. But I just use Google Spreadsheets to track all my artists, and I share it with anybody that wants it. So again, I'm happy to share that since we're not doing the bookings for musicians anymore. We've got about 150 guys on there. And yeah. Facebook and YouTube and Reverb Nation for researching the bands before you go and see them. And I always keep a list of like the events, actually it's right on my fridge at home, of all the bands playing locally in town. Go through the papers every week and just put it on the fridge and try to go to as many as I can. It's fun anyways. Yeah,
tough life, eh?
Yeah.
What about Anthony? Are there any tools that you've used in the past?
No, there was a cool site from the technical side of things for a while that you can create stage plots easily, so you could send it to an artist that didn't have one and say, hey, check this out. But unfortunately, I think that site has been taken down.
No.
Sorry.
Hey, it's not your fault. It's okay. I'm not blaming you. I mean, it would have been good to know that existed. It'd be interesting to know. Hey, everybody out there in internet land, if you want to get this tool out there, I think if we promote it correctly, I think that would get used by a lot of people. Heidi, any tools or tips for communication?
Kind of along the lines of Bob. I join every venue's calendars, right? So I'm alerted all the time to who's in town or knowing where they're all playing. So I keep that going. I think that's a good thing for people to do. So you're not just relying on posters or newspaper or print stuff. Join every venue in your city so you know what's happening. I think we need some more tools, more resources like that, because I think for me it's more word of mouth, personal communication about artists, but and a resource for me is BC Touring Council, though I can turn to them a lot.
Well, we've all forgotten one really good resource, which is the International Special Events Society and the all-important communities page. You can get on there, you can post questions, you can seek out artists in any city in the world, and you can get reviews, contacts. So use the International Special Events Society community page, and if you're not a member, that's a good reason to become a member and reach out to us to find out how you can become a member. Okay, we're kind of getting to the stage where we need to start wrapping this thing up. Is there any takeaways or any points or any questions that the panel has for each other that we haven't covered already?
I have a question for the rest of the panel, actually. So I know my musicians will want to know this and be happy I asked. So say you're a new band, and especially an original band, and you're hoping to get some paying gigs for some events. What's the best way to approach these event planners? Because I'm sure you don't want to spam, hey, here's my demo. What's the best way to find out these gigs exist and start working with the planners, especially someone newer?
I think for me, I do get a lot of calls and emails, and I've actually had bands like knock on my office door and hand me, their CD or something to listen to. For me, if I don't know of someone, like an email sort of introducing themselves, and then I think as an event planner myself, it's up to me if they send me a link to something they've done, and it's the right fit for me, then I'll take the next step in meeting them. I'm going out for coffee or something. And I try to do that because I do have a passion for musicians and artists. So if I'm busy at the time they approach me, I let them know that I've kept them on a list and I have so many different things I can book them for. So I do like to try to meet them if they're local and give them a shot because I care about it. But I think a lot of times people don't take the effort to meet them and let them know what's coming up or suggest them to other people. I keep a rolling list of it, so if it's not me that can fit them somewhere, I give their information out to other people that are doing festivals or events or bookings.
Anthony, anything you add there?
Attend ISES events and network, and it's a great way to meet people and get your name out there. And then personally, if I do come across that, I'll usually forward them on to some of the local booking agents, and that can help them out because that's the best way to network and get yourself out there in that way.
Great. I agree totally, but networking is the most important thing you can do in any area of special events, and we can't understate that enough. And you need to look at your associations for that good entry point, but also utilize the people that you meet. Just because the person isn't a meeting planner doesn't mean that they don't have a network that you can utilize. So, for instance, I work in the event production side of things. So on the face of it, I'm probably not booking an artist, but I'm constantly getting asked by event planners, hey, can you suggest someone for this theme of event? So if you can reach out to those decor companies, the technical production companies, and share your style and your knowledge and your demo, then you never know what you might get out of it. Also, social media, one of the greatest tools we've had come along in many years for self-promotion and effective marketing. You need to be smart about the way that you use it, but rather than send that email with a link to your demo, you can make a slightly more subtle and passive connection to a planner by saying, hey, on Twitter, check out my YouTube page, it has some of my demos. So being smart about the way that you use social media and using that to expand your network. Anybody got any other closing thoughts?
You're covering it all, Anthony.
Very thorough. That's good stuff.
I do actually. So I find in the event community too, this is a tough distinction, but it's really clear to me after doing this for a few years that you're hiring two completely separate services when you're hiring a cover band versus an original band.
Fantastic.
And actually think of that like you would a painter who is going to come and do an artistic painting versus someone that's going to come and paint the walls of your house. One's not better than the other, but the one band is in a completely different mental place where they've made a decision as a group to say, you know what, this is about getting paid gigs, this is about pleasing them, this isn't about our art. We're doing this because we love to play and we want to make some cash, so that's a cover band, versus an original band who, you know, also wants to get paid, of course, but they're looking to expose them, you know, expose their art, get to the next level, build their fan base, and, you know, hopefully not have to go get a day job. And so the goals are completely separate. And I love, for me, I'm so happy whenever I can help an original band get a paid gig, especially with exposure. So you look at things like South by Southwest, where Coca-Cola or McDonald's brings on a huge crowd and a budget and a rider to get these brand new bands this huge exposure, and that makes a lot of artists famous and accelerates their careers. So I'd love to see more special event planners doing that, but I think this distinction is really important.
And, of course, you don't have a cover band. They don't have songs to play if there wasn't an original band to write the music originally. So if you're not supporting original music, then eventually you're going to be hearing the same cover songs forever and ever and ever.
And you'd be surprised how corporate clients will react to original artists, too, if it's marketed correctly. It can become a real interesting thing and a draw versus, you know, the same 12-song 80s set list that you had at the last Christmas party. Sometimes it's really interesting to let people know ahead of time why you're supporting this band, why you like them, where they can get the CD, and make that part of what you're doing. Because I find most people really do like original music, and they like to be part of that artist's journey. So if you are an event planner and you haven't tried it out, just try it as a little experiment. I think you might be pleasantly surprised.
What I've seen some event planners do that's been very effective for bringing original music into their events, they're always a bit apprehensive because, like Corrine said, you're going to spend a lot of your event having people coming up asking if you can play the Love Shack. So what they've done to combat this is they've made the live music, the original live music, a big focus of a portion of the event. So maybe after the official part, the award ceremony or whatever it may be, they introduce the original band, they play their set, and once that band's finished, they get a DJ to come on and play those party tracks that everybody wants to dance to. Yeah. It can be more cost effective than having two bands and more logistically achievable to be able to throw to the DJ to play the Love Shack and to play the Grease Mega Mix and all those cheesy songs that the people want to dance to when they've had a few glasses of red wine. But they still get the original act, and they still get that uniqueness, maybe theme-specific music to suit their event, and a little bit more class, I like to think.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I think it is probably time for us to wrap this up. I'd like to thank our panel of esteemed industry experts. I'd like to thank the viewers at home for joining us. You can connect with ISES Vancouver on our Twitter through @ISESVancouver. You can use the hashtag ISES Hangouts. You can post comments on our YouTube channel. If you would like to participate in these panels or ask questions, you can email hangouts@isesvancouver.com. ISES is the International Special Events Society. We have chapters and members in almost every place you could possibly imagine. You can find us at ises.com. If you work in the events industry or have an interest in working in the events industry, we are your association. Some of our contact details are in our lower thirds. Well, mine are anyway. But if you want to get in contact with any of the people on today's panels, email us and we will hook you up. Don't forget to check out and subscribe to our YouTube channel to watch our previous episodes. Thank you again, viewers, for joining us on this episode of ISES Hangouts. We'll be back very soon. And thank you to my panel. Say goodbye, everybody.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Yeah.